evening. I'm Spot On Weather meteorologist Matthew Euler, and welcome to the weekly Teleconnections discussion for Friday, 12 November 2021. Starting off with our 500 millibar height anomalies for the 12th of November 2021. Look at the graphic there on the left, and as a reminder, the purple and the green and the blue coloring indicates upper level troughs in the atmosphere, which are typically associated with cooler temperatures and unsettled weather. The maroon and orangish shadings on that graphic on the left are indicative of upper level ridges. And with ridges, we typically have dry weather and above normal temperatures. All right, so starting off over the Western Pacific tonight and off the coast of Japan, we have an upper level trough. Let me go ahead and set up this laser pointer again. So generally what we have is an upper level trough over the Western Pacific and Japan, generally in this location here. Downstream of that we have this pretty significant upper level ridge which extends into the western Bering Sea and the western Aleutian Islands across the Pacific Ocean up into the Bering, followed by a downstream trough. Now this upper level trough is in the Gulf of Alaska, right in this area here, and into west central Canada. Into the Northeast Pacific, right in this location here. Then we have an upper level ridge over the U.S. West Coast, generally in this location, moving up into west central Canada, and right in through here we have an upper level ridge. Followed by an upper level trough, actual pretty significant closed upper level low, which is situated over the Midwestern United States, specifically over parts of southern Minnesota and Iowa. And this has actually been responsible for producing some of the first snowflakes of the season today across portions of the Midwest, parts of northern Illinois in general, and parts of Wisconsin. Now, as we work our way downstream from that closed low, that upper level trough over the central U.S., the Midwest and central U.S., there is an upper level ridge that is generally extending, it's orientated more from the southeast to the northwest across the main ridge axis is extending across New England into southeastern Canada. And then there's an upper level trough generally situated over the North Atlantic Ocean with a closed upper level low, then positioned generally to the west of the British Isles in this general location here. And there's an upper level ridge, which generally extends over the far eastern Atlantic Ocean on into south central Europe, followed by an upper level trough over central Siberia, which is this green and blue shading at this location. So there's a lot going on. We got a lot of what we call shortwave ridges and shortwave troughs at 500 millibars, 500 millibars being about 18,000 feet above the Earth's surface on today's particular weather chart. And we'd expect that this time of year as we're getting closer to mid-November. There's going to be a lot of transitory systems, troughs and ridges that are going to basically get pushed along by the polar front jet stream, those stronger jet stream winds across the northern hemisphere. So taking a look at the MJO, the Madden-Julian oscillation phases and areas of enhanced convection. Again, MJO ranges from phases 1 to 8, with 8 being enhanced convection closer to the international date line, which is 180 degrees west longitude. When we have general phases 4 and 5, we have enhanced convection over the maritime continent, over Australia. If we have MJO in phases 2 or 3, we're talking about the Indian Ocean is where the most active convection is occurring. And then phases 8 and 1 are much closer to the African continent. So what do we have going on today here on the Pacific Satellite on 12 November 2021? We have an area of low pressure, which is situated with that trough with a front extending southwestward off the Pacific Northwest. And so we have this nice little upper level low with that, again, that trough extending from it. In general, we have some scattered convection there, about 10 degrees north latitude across the equatorial And more towards the central Pacific is where it's most active, between 140 and 160 degree west longitude. Looking further out to the western Pacific Ocean, we have a lot more convection indicated on this infrared shot, generally indicated by these brighter white clouds. Okay, so we have a lot of thunderstorm activity, upward vertical motion in association with this area of convergence. In general, we do have that area of low pressure there with the trough situated off of Japan, as we briefed earlier. Now we take a look at the MJO temperature composites. Generally for the months of November, December, and January, the blue coloring indicates below normal temperatures, while the orange and the yellow shading indicates above normal temperatures. So for November, December, and January, if we have the MJO, let's say in phases 7, 8, and 1, we typically see these below normal values. Phases 8 and 1 have below normal values specifically for the eastern United States this time of year. If we look at the forecast here on the right, showing the GFS Ensemble forecast, where are we at? Here are the phases again. 1 go all the way around counterclockwise to phase 8. In general, where are we at right now? The NCEP GEFS, the Ensemble forecasting system, generally showing that we're in this inner smaller circle, again, which indicates minimal impact in the null phase of the MJO. And now this forecast runs out through November 25th, 2021. Looking at the GFS operational model today through the 25th of November 2021, now pay attention to the aqua color line here, very similar to the GEFS forecast, showing the MJO really not being much of a factor in the U.S. weather right on through the end of November, really. You'll see that aqua color there, that line in the inner circle. And then the Navy ESPC MJO phase diagram forecast. This is the ensemble mean, by the way. This is the mean of all the members. Generally showing a null phase to start. And by the way, this Navy ESPC MJO forecast goes out through 19 December. But in general, it shows a null phase where we're currently situated at the present time here as we approach mid-November. And this model does show a weaker amplitude phase 4 and 5, which would equate to that upward vertical motion and convection over the maritime continent. And then generally, the forecast is for the ensemble mean of all the ensemble members here. The ensemble mean takes it back to the null phase by the 13th of December and beyond. Notice these green lines here, these lighter colored green lines. Those are a lot of different of the ensemble members, showing many different potential possibilities with the MJO forecast. For example, some of these MJO ensemble members show the MJO going into phases 6 and 7. Now, what would that mean, 6 and 7? 6 would mean very mild across the Midwest and eastern U.S. with the orange shading here, whereas 7 would indicate cooler than normal temperatures. So, really going to be interesting to watch the MJO. But as of right now, null phase continues. Not much of an impact to the United States weather. Looking at the latest sea surface temperature anomalies and the La Nina update overall, generally the sea surface temperature anomalies on the left are in degrees Celsius. Blue coloring, such as this location, the eastern equatorial and central Pacific area, this blue coloring is indicative of La Nina conditions. And if you look up here in the Gulf of Alaska and the northeastern Pacific, much colder below normal water temperatures continue in this particular area off the Pacific Northwestern coast. And then we have warmer than normal temperatures across the north central Pacific, and there's some warmer than normal conditions situated between Siberia, China, and Japan right now. So that's interesting too to take note of. During La Nina winters, La Nina time periods, we typically see cooler than normal water where we're seeing it, and the warmer than normal water out in the western Pacific Ocean. So overall, we look at the graph on the right. This is the latest temperature trace of the water temperatures in the Nino 3.4 region, which NOAA uses to classify whether there's El Nino, La Nina, or ENSO neutral conditions. And you'll notice from October on down through just about the beginning of November, there's been a general decline in those water temperatures, cooling in the Nino 3.4 region. But now look at this interesting thing, right? Look how this interesting trend, look at this, how this occurred We have an upward trend or a slight warming in the Nino 3.4 region, the waters, and actually warmed to about a negative 0.72 degrees Celsius value before once again dropping back down. So you see this little bit of the last 48 hours, we see more of a downward trend again in those water temperatures. So we currently stand at about 0.79 degrees Celsius below normal water temps in the Nino 3.4 region. And here it is right here. I mean, we went from last Friday's video where we were sitting at 0.92 Celsius below normal water. Almost, I mean, at one point we hit 1 degree Celsius below normal water. And we went from that to now 0.79 degrees Celsius. And that is indicative of a weak La Nina. Cooler than normal water continues, like I mentioned, in the Gulf of Alaska, as I pointed out, in the northeastern Pacific, off that Pacific Northwest coast, as well as warmer than normal water has remained pretty much where it's located over that north central Pacific, as well as the western Atlantic. And so we still do have the indicator of a negative Pacific decadal oscillation. This would create this horseshoe, below normal water temperature horseshoe shape from the northeastern Pacific, Gulf of Alaska, down the west coast of the U.S., and right there connected into just southeast of the Hawaiian Islands back to the cooler than normal water associated with La Nina. Looking at the intensity classifications once more, and here they are, weak 0.5 to 0.9 degrees Celsius temperature anomaly below normal. Moderate La Nina would be 1 to 1.4 degrees Celsius below normal water. Strong La Nina would be 1.5 to 1.9 degrees Celsius anomaly. And again, just to point this out, the Nino 3.4 region, this is the general area, bounded by 5 north to 5 degrees south latitude and 120 out to 170, so right in here, west longitude. So again, as you can see, at minus 0.79 degrees Celsius, we are sitting in the weak La Nina phase. And the importance of this, again, is the weaker the La Nina, the less impactful that is going to be for the upcoming winter season. So we're keeping a close eye on the trends in those water temperatures. Now let's move on to our teleconnections forecast based off the latest model data. And this was taken from the 00Z model run for today, the 12th of November 2021. One thing I want to mention before I start with this for this week is I want to mention that these forecasts change quite frequently. So at one point in time, we might look at it like we have been weekly on Fridays. One point in time, it may look like a certain teleconnection will go a certain direction. But then, you come back to the drawing board a week later, a new video, and it's completely different. So I'm going to show you some of these changes from last week. Starting with the AO, right? Negative Arctic oscillation is on the left, and the general conditions associated with a negative AO. Again, generally showing we have this East Pacific ridge, which is strong and persistent into the northeastern Pacific, ridging up into Alaska with a negative AO. What that does, when you bring that ridge up into higher latitudes to Alaska, towards Alaska, it generally tends to dislodge all this Arctic air. You get cross-polar flow. You get an area of persistent low pressure near Hudson Bay, and you get this repetitive reinforcing shots of cold air on the backside of this Hudson Bay vortex, and generally that spills into the Midwest and eastern U.S. during a negative AO. With a positive AO, things change. We now have low pressure in the Gulf of Alaska, so that generally remains a persistent feature. And we generally have more of a west to east, again, zonal jet stream, polar front jet stream across the United States. So that's just going to allow, with a more west to east flow, it's going to basically keep the coldest air to the north. With a positive AO, you have lower pressures in the higher latitudes up towards the Arctic. And you have higher pressure down further in the mid-latitudes. So the difference between these two pressure systems, the low pressures, so the Arctic, and the high pressures of mid-latitudes, generates a general west to east jet stream and milder air from coast to coast in the U.S. So the European deterministic AO forecast, let's start with that one today. All right, so right now we're sitting on the 12th of November, so we're generally sitting at neutral conditions at the present time. Now, over time, we expect this AO to bump up into the positive phase and then back down and drop. Now, looking like it's going to turn negative according to the latest European deterministic AO forecast, it's going to turn more negative after the 19th of November. So that's something to keep an eye on. This is one of those changes that we didn't see last week with AO. It was not indicating this kind of drop off. The European EPS AO 50 perturb members showing you the green line is the ensemble mean. The white boxed line is associated with the control. And in general, we're sitting neutral through about the 14th of November with this particular model. And then we're going positive, and that'll last through about the 17th of November before dropping off negative. So we got two models now. We're 2 for 2 in general consensus as far as the AO going negative. European EPS AO 50 perturb members. This one goes all the way out beyond Christmas. Look at this, 26 December. So this is a 46-day forecast. Now, when you have this much of time in the future of any kind of model, it's going to naturally, the spread is going to grow much greater further out in time. The confidence levels will decrease. So you notice how these blue bars here, these blue lines are generally not as tall in the short term through the 21st of November. And then they grow taller and taller. See these blue lines, how they're growing taller and taller? That's generally indicating more uncertainty or more model spread. But in general, if you take the average of all the ensemble model members and you get this green line, this ensemble mean or average of all the model members that we're using in this forecast, generally what we have is a positive AO through the 17th of November, dropping back down to negative between the 18th and 27th of November, and then becoming more neutral as we head into early December, maybe a little bump up to slightly positive around mid-December, back towards neutral. GFS deterministic AO forecast. Currently today on the 12th of November, we're looking just around coming up on neutral conditions really, maybe slightly negative, and then positive through the 18th of November. And then look at this drop off again. This is very similar in its indications as European deterministic as far as this negative turn to the AO, and then it tends to go back up towards positive and then come back down again. I've noticed with the GFS deterministic AO forecast, it tends to be more of a roller coaster, especially when you get out beyond, I'd say, 9 to 10 days. It tends to have a lot of ups and downs associated with the forecast. So it's just something to watch. ECMWF V12 AO 30 perturb members showing a negative phase of the AO, becoming slightly positive, then dropping off to negative again. So all these models are saying the same thing. 18, 19 November, a negative phased AO. And that could really play into some colder temperatures across the eastern U.S., a more persistent, repetitive, reinforcing shots of cold air. Looking at the North Atlantic oscillation, NAO forecast, positive NAO phase on the left and negative NAO phase on the right. Generally showing you the differences, right? So you look at the positive NAO phase, the jet stream is more west to east. So the coldest air tends to remain up over the Arctic areas with a positive NAO phase. With a negative NAO phase, the jet stream becomes much more amplified, where we get this digging deep trough across the eastern U.S., off the eastern seaboard. You get this huge downstream blocking upper level ridge into Greenland, followed by another downstream trough into Europe with a negative NAO phase. So those are the main differences. Let's take a look at the models. European deterministic NAO forecast, generally showing a negative phase of the NAO, climbing up to slightly positive, 16 to 21 November, and then coming back down negative again, generally after the 21st, right around the 22nd of November. European EPS, Ensemble Prediction System, NAO 50 perturb members, generally showing great agreement between the ensemble mean, the green line, and the white line, the control. In the short term, pretty good agreement actually all the way out through about the 22nd of November, so about 10 days out. We got some pretty good agreement. And in general, what we're expecting is a negative trend here at the start for the NAO, but then it's going to bump up to slightly positive between the 16th and the 22nd of November, and then it's going to come back down negative again, generally towards late November. European EPS NAO 50% member forecast out through the 26th of December, just beyond Christmas. We have a negative phase NAO climbing to positive, slightly positive, in the period 16 to 24 November, and then becoming neutral. You notice how this green line is closer to this middle, the zero line here down the middle of the diagram. GFS deterministic NAO forecast, generally showing, again, GFS having this tendency of a lot of ups and downs and ups in the longer range. So I look at this model, and it doesn't look very stable to me, is what I see when I see a lot of this tendency of ups and downs. In the short term, it's showing a negative NAO through the 15th of November, then becoming positive 16 to 20 November, then transitioning negative again, then going back positive. Looking at the ECMWF V12 NAO 30% member forecast out through 28 November, just beyond the Thanksgiving holiday, shows a negative NAO through 14 November, generally right here, transitioning positive 15 to 21 November, and then slightly negative again after the 21st of November, towards the end of November. Looking at the Pacific North American P&A forecast, generally showing again the differences between the positive P&A on the left, bottom left here, and then on the bottom right we have the negative P&A. Typically with a positive P&A pattern, we get the upper level ridge, higher heights, upper level heights over the western U.S. and western Canada, as far north as Alaska with a positive P&A, and then you get this downstream trough over the eastern U.S., generally much below normal temperatures. With a negative P&A, we have a reverse order of the trough ridge couplet. With a negative P&A, we get an upper level trough across Canada, the western U.S., colder and unsettled conditions out in that location, and a downstream ridge in the southeastern U.S. on up into the mid-Atlantic, and milder temperatures and dry conditions. Looking at the European deterministic P&A forecast, 10 days out in time through the 22nd of November, generally we're looking at a positive P&A through the 14th of November, transitioning negative between 15 to 20 November, and then becoming positive again. European EPS P&A forecast, 50% members out through 27 November, showing a positive P&A, transitioning negative 15 to 19 November, then back slightly positive again. And it does show signs of going neutral 26 November through the remainder of the month. European EPS P&A 50% members. This forecast goes out all the way to 26 December, showing a positive phase to the P&A initially, and then transitioning negative 17 to 18 November, slightly positive before dropping back to negative. Look at the long range here with the P&A going negative. GFS deterministic P&A forecast showing a positive phase to the P&A today on the 12th of November, descending down to the negative phase of the P&A, generally around the 17th of November, through the 21st of November, remaining negative for the P&A before becoming briefly neutral at this point, and then going negative again after 25 November. And then the ECMWF V12 P&A, 30% members out through 28 November, showing a positive phase of the P&A pattern, neutral conditions, and then negative 15 to 20 November, before becoming positive again 21 to 24 November, then neutral again. So again, not very consistent as far as the phases for the P&A. With a positive P&A, we get a trough in the eastern U.S., the upper level ridge in the western U.S., and so this would indicate a transition back to a trough in the west and a ridge in the east. And going back positive, we flip the script again as far as the pressure systems. Looking at the Eastern Pacific Oscillation EPO forecast, here's a negative EPO on the left and a positive EPO on the right. And the main things you want to look at here are, with the negative EPO, we get an upper level ridge in the Gulf of Alaska and northeastern Pacific. And then we get a trough or lower pressure generally situated in the vicinity of the Hawaiian Islands. Positive EPO We generally get that Aleutian low, south of the Aleutian Islands there in the Gulf of Alaska, persistent troughing in that particular area with more milder conditions. Now, with a positive EPO, look at what happens here. The coldest temperatures remain locked up over the Arctic. Looking at the European deterministic EPO forecast, generally showing for today's date, 12 November, a positive trend to the EPO. So again, we go back, look at this chart. A positive EPO trend, that would indicate milder conditions across the entire United States from coast to coast with a more zonal jet stream. But notice it does trend negative, and then eventually back to neutral after the 19th of November. European EPO 50 perturb members out to 27 November, generally showing fairly good agreement through about the 19th of November with a slightly positive trend. Then conditions become more neutral and then slightly positive again. Control showing a much sharper positive amplitude, whereas the ensemble mean showing closer to the neutral conditions all the way out through 27 November. European EPO 50 perturb members through the 26th of December, showing a positive phase of the EPO, slightly negative then transitioning back to slightly positive before going to neutral conditions, basically the 15th of December, right on through the Christmas holiday. The GFS deterministic EPO forecast, generally showing a positive phase today on the 12th of November, transitioning back towards neutral, back to positive, neutral again, then up and then down again, and then back up again. So again, I take this model with a grain of salt is what I'm getting at, because of these ups and downs beyond the 10-day period with the GFS deterministic. Looking at the ECMWF V12 EPO 30 perturb members out through 28 November, generally showing a positive phase of the EPO. Through the 21st of November, then becoming more strongly positive. Look at this jump up here after the 21st of November, from 22 to 20, all the way out through the 28th of November, a more strongly positive EPO on this particular model. All right, so now let's take a look at the QBO update. We currently are situated in a negative QBO, or easterly phase QBO. This is the latest sounding from Singapore. This is the radio sound observation. And generally showing anything to the left of this vertical line is negative values indicative of an easterly phase or negative QBO. So between 10 millibars right on down to 50 millibars, we generally remain in that easterly phase QBO state. Here is the latest value, around negative 13 on this mean monthly QBO index. And generally, again, as a reminder, the easterly QBO tends to favor cold temperatures across the eastern U.S. and a weakening stratospheric polar vortex in winter. There's been plenty of research on this, and that's exactly what the researchers have discovered. Easterly QBOs are generally colder. In fact, if you look at winters where the QBO for December, January, and February was on the order of negative 10 to negative 15, look at that. And we're sitting at negative 13 right now. Generally, if it remains an easterly phase or negative QBO between these values, the blue and the purple shading show below normal surface temperatures between the months of December to February. And there's many years to back up this relationship. We can look at 1959, 1966, 2015. That's not that far, not that long ago. 2006, 1957, 1963, similar, 1971. 1977, 1984, 1992, 2001, 2010, and then 1980. So there's quite a few years that have shown this relationship. Looking at the latest polar vortex update, this is the GFS model. The graphic on the left shows today's date, Friday, the 12th of November, 2021. The graphic on the right, I go out to about 204 hours into the future. That graphic on the right shows the forecast for Saturday morning, the 20th of November, 2021. Generally, on these graphics, the blue and the green shadings indicate colder stratospheric temperatures, while the orange and the maroon shadings indicate warmer than normal stratospheric temperatures. So, in general, what we're looking at, the graphic on the left, we have stratospheric temperatures in the blue over the Arctic as well as stratospheric temperatures extending, cooler temperatures extending down into the United States and Canada. And we also have an elongated vortex, polar vortex right now, that is kind of being stretched. Specifically, the GFS model is showing a more stretched polar vortex right on through the third week of November and out to Thanksgiving. So that could result in persistently colder temperatures across the eastern U.S. Looking at the model, the European model here for the polar vortex, the stratospheric temperatures, very similar to the GFS. The graphic on the left showing today, 12 November. The graphic on the right, Saturday morning, the 20th of November. Generally showing a similar trend. We don't really see any anomalous, warming conditions in the stratosphere over the Arctic region. So we expect the polar vortex to maybe slightly weak, but it's not going to be severely hampered, let's just say, if this comes to fruition. Looking at the GEFS, the GFS Ensemble Forecasting System, Polar Vortex Update. Again, great model consensus as well with the GEFS, with those cooler blue and green shadings, where they really should be over the Arctic region, indicative of not such a weak polar vortex, right on through the 20th of November. All right, so now let's take a look at some of the latest Ensemble model data. This is European EPS. Upper left-hand graphic is the 14th of November. The upper right-hand graphic is Tuesday the 16th of November. Bottom left is the Saturday the 20th of November, and then the bottom right graphic indicates Tuesday the 23rd of November. So the bottom right graphic, we're kind of getting closer to the Thanksgiving holiday. All right, and again, as a reminder, similar to what we looked at for the anomalies for the 500 millibar heights, if you see an orange shading, that's indicative of an upper level ridge and milder and drier conditions. Where you see this green shading, that's indicative of stronger troughs and generally associated with cooler temperatures and unsettled weather. So overall today on the European EPS, we see this upper level ridge. We have this high height center that's situated off the coast of California, and we have this upper level ridge, higher heights along the U.S. West Coast, with a downstream trough over the upper Midwest. And with time, you look at the upper right-hand graphic here, by Tuesday, the 16th of November, we see an upper level trough now moving into the northern plain states. We see more of a flattened jet stream flow by Tuesday afternoon, the 18th of November, with a trough. The trough that was over the Midwest is now transitioned out over the northwestern Atlantic by this point in time. And then if we move ahead here to Saturday, the 20th of November, look at the blue shading. We still have troughing extending from eastern Canada down into the eastern U.S., and now we have these upper level heights rising once again over the eastern Pacific Ocean. Looking at the bottom right, 23 November, Tuesday 23 November, we're almost at Thanksgiving, which is a couple days shy of Thanksgiving on this graphic in the bottom right. Generally showing that continued pattern of higher heights, an upper level ridge off the U.S. West Coast with a downstream trough across the eastern U.S. So the overall common theme when we look at this is higher heights over the Northeast Pacific and West Coast with a downstream trough over the eastern U.S., literally right on through 23 November, and potentially even longer lasting into the Thanksgiving holiday weekend. So that's going to be something to keep an eye on. Looking at the NSEP GFS Ensemble Forecasting System, the NSEP GEFS, again, in the upper left graphic here, I'm showing for Sunday, 14 November, the upper right-hand graphic here is Tuesday, 16 November. Bottom left is Saturday, 20 November, and the bottom right is Tuesday, 23 November. So in general, for Sunday, we're expecting a trough to be generally dominant feature across the upper Midwest, Great Lakes area, and working its way eastward towards the East Coast, and an upper level ridge over the U.S. West Coast. So we have a nice little dip in the jet stream, generally from the Midwest to the East Coast by Sunday. We go to Tuesday, the 16th of November, the trough, very similar to the European EPS, showing that trough is now pivoting off to the northeast over the northwest Atlantic, with an upper level ridge building, a little shortwave ridge building across the Midwest. Now this little shortwave ridge, it will transition more towards the east by Wednesday the 17th of November and Thursday the 18th of November. Now this little shortwave trough, this little upper level ridge, is actually going to result in very quickly warming temperatures across the eastern U.S. as we get into Wednesday the 17th and Thursday the 18th of November, before another trough pivots its way towards the eastern U.S. Here is Saturday 20 November, generally showing a more flattened look to the jet stream. And then bottom right here is 23 November. Look how the trough has set back in across the eastern U.S. So overall, this particular model, the ECMWF, is showing more troughing across the eastern U.S. with occasional transitory ridges where we get these ridges that kind of move through the pattern in between the troughs and result in warming periods in between those cooler periods. So looking at the final thoughts for tonight's video, the MJO overall is currently in the null phase, and we've been saying this repetitively for the last few weeks. So we're expecting minimal impacts to the U.S. weather. La Nina conditions continue across the equatorial eastern and central Pacific, but one thing to note, again, I'm very much intrigued by, is how these temperatures have slightly warmed over the past week from 0.92 degrees Celsius below normal to 0.79 degrees Celsius below normal in that El Nino 3.4 region. The weaker the La Nina, this is the big one, everybody. Just if there's one thing you really take away from tonight's video, and I've kind of mentioned this in my past videos, the weaker the La Nina, the less impact it is going to have on U.S. weather during the winter season. This is going to open the door for other more dominant teleconnections to set in and to overpower or become more dominant than the La Nina itself. The winter forecasts and many forecasting outlets are showing a very mild winter across the eastern U.S. because of La Nina. But there's other teleconnections out there that we have to think about. The sea surface temperature anomalies, again, cooler than normal water across the Gulf of Alaska and the Northeast Pacific, with warmer than normal water over the North Central Pacific Ocean. The negative or cold Pacific decadal oscillation, the PDO, continues with those coolest temps along the U.S. Pacific Northwest and in the Gulf of Alaska. This favors milder temperatures across the U.S. Southeast and Mid-Atlantic regions. The models are indicating a neutral to slightly positive, then negative trend in the Arctic oscillation, the AO, through the end of November. So we're generally expecting, when we have a neutral AO, we expect near average temperatures across the eastern U.S., but they would transition to colder than normal temps after 19 November if this AO trending towards negative verifies. And the models are also indicating a negative to neutral trend in the NAO, the North Atlantic oscillation, through the end of November. So we'd expect colder than normal to near average temperatures across the eastern U.S. Negative NAO, colder than normal temps in the east U.S. If we have a neutral NAO, near average temps across the eastern U.S. All right, so looking at models, they're indicating a widely varying but mostly positive PNA pattern through the end of November. There are a lot of ups and downs, but when I'm looking at the Ensemble models, when I'm looking at these, all right, for both the European EPS and then the ECMWF, there's a common theme here. That common theme is generally we're getting above normal heights or a ridge over the eastern Pacific into the western U.S. and western Canada with lower than normal heights downstream with trough across the eastern U.S. and cooler temps. Models are also indicating a widely varying trend in the Eastern Pacific Oscillation, the EPO, through the end of November. The Ensemble models, again, they're showing that upper level ridge in the Northeastern Pacific for the most part, and that would be more indicative of a negative EPO with the mildest temperatures along the U.S. West Coast and the coldest temperatures across the Eastern U.S. Models are indicating an elongated or stratospheric polar vortex, that elongation or stretch polar vortex through the third week of November. And this is going to favor colder than normal temperatures across the eastern U.S. right on through the 23rd of November. So that's something really, of course, we're always keeping an eye on the polar vortex. we're always keeping an eye on the stratospheric warming, or what the temperatures are in the stratosphere at 10 millibars. But in general, it's interesting to watch this pattern recently. So the overall assessment, there's lots of model variability this week in regard to the teleconnections forecast. There really is a lot of ups and downs to some of these teleconnections. An elongated polar vortex again, along with higher heights across the eastern Pacific, western U.S., western Canada. That's the main signal I'm seeing on this week's teleconnections and the Ensemble runs. That's going to favor colder than normal temperatures across the eastern U.S. through 23 November 2021. Now keep in mind, it's not going to be, between now and the 23rd of November, it's not just going to be cold all the time. There are going to be these occasional milder periods as transitory ridges briefly move into the eastern U.S. The overall main synoptic feature, however, will be that trough across the eastern seaboard, as indicated by those latest Ensemble models, the GEFS, the EPS. I'm watching closely the potential for a more negative AO after 19 November. That's going to play huge into what happens, let's say, beyond the 23rd of November. The last week of November into the beginning of December, I'm going to be watching that Arctic oscillation trend very closely to see what occurs with that, as it could favor it could be a more favorable pattern for continued cold across the eastern U.S. through the early part of December. So we'll see if that the trend changes over the coming days. Additionally, La Nina has weakened a bit over the past week, as I mentioned. Is this just a temporary blip, or is this something more significant that could really change the outcome of the weather in the United States this winter season? Keep in mind, meteorological winter starts 1 December and runs to the 28th of February. And so we're not technically even in winter yet. We're still in late fall, meteorological fall. So there's a lot of interesting things with tonight's teleconnections discussion. It takes extensive analysis to look at all these factors, all these teleconnections, and trying to figure out, if you look at these 2 pages, I do this every week in my final thoughts, and there's so many considerations here that can impact the weather in the United States, the overall upper air pattern from the MJO to the La Nina, to these sea surface temperature anomalies across the Pacific Ocean, the Arctic oscillation NAO, the PNA pattern, the EPO. Another index or oscillation I haven't mentioned is the WPO, the Western Pacific Oscillation, the polar vortex. So it can get complicated at times, is what I'm getting at. It's never simple. It's not like, a math problem where you are going to come to a certain definitive answer, right, with a math problem, right? This takes a lot of analysis and interpretation, which I definitely enjoy to do throughout the winter season, especially as these teleconnections really amplified during that time of year. But it's real interesting. There's a lot of research out there on these teleconnections and how they drive the weather, not only in the United States, but across Asia, Siberia, across Europe. So I really enjoy sharing this information with you after I do these in-depth analyses. And I really hope you learn something from these videos. All right, with that, I wanted to let everyone know that the next teleconnections video discussion, it will be delayed. It will be delayed to early December. I'm targeting the 3rd of December to get the next teleconnections discussion online. In the meantime, I do have another very interesting video that I hope to share with everyone soon that I'm working on, looking at the overall trend in temperatures across the United States. I show a little bit of the globe and how temperatures have changed over the years. One of the most curious things I always think about is how many above normal days do we have in the winter season across the United States as compared to below normal days? If you look at the ratios, just pay attention to your departures, your temperature departures, wherever you live in the United States. Think about this. The curiosity is within my mind, and I'm thinking, I really want to look at the research on that. How many days in the winter season and I even expanded it out to the different seasons of fall, spring, and summer additionally. You very rarely get a record cold day in the summer season, but you sure do get a lot of record heat. You sure do get a lot of heat waves in the summer, and you sure do get, even in the wintertime, you get record warmth in the winter season, more so than record cold. And so, is it really true that our winters are getting less harsh? They're getting less cold? They're getting warmer? Is the winter season shrinking in time? These are the questions that I'm doing research on right now, and I'm putting together the next spot on weather video about temperature departures and how they change between the seasons, and what's the ratio of record high versus record lows across the United States. So a lot of interesting data I'm compiling right now for that video. So I hope to be sharing that video with everyone soon. But that wraps things up tonight on the Teleconnections discussion. Looking forward, I appreciate everybody again subscribing to the channel. It takes a lot of, like I said, it's a lot of work from this end to put together these informative video discussions. And I certainly do appreciate the kind, positive comments I'm getting for some of these videos, and how much everyone appreciates this particular data. And again, the best thing about it is it's absolutely free here at Spot on Weather. We don't charge a dime for you to see these assessments. Some other sites will charge you to get into their thoughts. But again, we absolutely love the weather and just want to share it with you. And that's all I've got, everybody. I hope you are having a great almost mid-November evening, wherever you are, wherever you're watching from. For now, go ahead and take care, everybody. God bless. Until next time.